Hello everybody and welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips. Just a couple of reminders. Last Wellness 101 class of the year conference call series starts on Tuesday, October 30th. And once again, we're including a lot of material in this last set of conference calls that is not in the curriculum book, not on the DVD. So we're going to try and enhance the discussion a little bit to make it really worthwhile for our members to participate. And then Conversations with Dr. Pam, that is on, Wednesday, November 7th, and we're going to talk about PSA testing for men. We have to give equal treatment to the men. I've been talking about mammography all year. And of course, conference next week, November 2nd, with an all-star cast, Dr. McDougall, Dr. Pilevsky, Dr. Barnard, Dr. Bregan. You can't miss it. Got to be here. It's fabulous. So let's get to today's programming. I have two issues I want to talk about. The first one is a study that all kinds of studies come out every week, as you know, and they sometimes are readily reinforcing what we talk about, and other times they confuse people. And this issue with salt intake and some of the studies about salt that have been coming out lately is a confusing issue. And one recently in Clinical Nutrition earlier this year reported the results of a meta-analysis that included about 270,000 people, showing that as increased salt, as the intake of salt increased, there was an increased risk of gastric cancer. And so the researchers said it didn't prove a cause and effect relationship between salt and cancer, but it's disturbed some people, and I get emails from people, and I totally understand this. You know, they take Wellness 101 and we tell them it's okay to eat salt unless you happen to be one of those rare people that's salt sensitive, and then they see something like this, or somebody emails it to them and they say, oh my gosh, should I rethink my strategy here, and am I going to hurt myself by eating salt? Well, if you read the study, and here's part of the problem, and it will be reflected in the next piece that I cover too, is that most people, and I understand this, don't go to the original article and read it. Most people have other things to do with their time. I guess I don't have anything else to do, so that's why I go back and read the articles. But in any case, if you go back and read the article in its entirety, it doesn't contradict what I say at all. First of all, most people who are eating a high salt diet, where the salt is coming from is processed foods, meat, dairy products. And this fact was acknowledged by the researchers, by the way. And this is a lot different than consuming salt, like salting your food at the table when you eat it as part of a health-promoting diet. And so to demonstrate this point, I mean, the researchers really did make my point on this, again, if you read the article. They performed more detailed analysis on several salt-rich foods and their effect on gastric cancer. And the additional analyses showed a statistically significant relationship between high consumption of pickled foods, salted fish, and processed meats, and rates of gastric cancer. But the interesting thing was miso soup, which is a very high salt content food, did not result in increased risk of gastric cancer. And in other words, for most people, the problem isn't salt, but the company that salt keeps. It's what the source of the salt is. So what happens when people adopt a wellness farm style diet is their consumption of foods like fish and meat and dairy and processed junk foods, it's sharply reduced or it's completely eliminated, best of all if it's eliminated. The consumption of salt is significantly reduced as a result of this. And so salt consumption for our members is in minimally processed foods. You know, it's added to a few foods that we might eat like spaghetti sauce, salting things at the tabletop. That's where the salt is coming from. So there's little evidence to suggest that this level of salt consumption is not good for health or creates problems. Again, for most people, I'm not shy about restricting salt for people who really should restrict their salt intake, but that's fortunately not most of the population. In fact, there are many studies, and I've covered them in previous broadcasts, and you can access them in the Health Briefs online library. Many studies, and a growing number of them, showing that extreme salt restriction actually can bring on many of the problems that salt restriction is supposed to avoid or result in avoiding. So I think we have put too much stock, frankly, into salt restriction as a way to address our health problems rather than paying attention to dietary pattern. Dr. John McDougall agrees with me on this. He talks about it in the starch solution, and he'll be talking about it at our conference too. He says, first of all, people like the taste of salt. We actually have receptors on our tongues, taste receptors on our tongues for salt. People are designed to eat salt, and it makes foods like vegetables and potatoes more enjoyable. I'm all for salting those foods if that's what it takes to get people to eat them. I'm a person who likes salty foods, so I certainly don't want to stop eating salt. Unfortunately, I'm not sensitive to it. So we'll reserve salt restriction for the people who really, really need it, and we won't salt restrict the rest. And actually, this study does not contradict my advice. Okay, so now on to the next thing. Boy, have I gotten a lot of emails about this, and it's in reference to the study that was published in a journal not too long ago concluding that organic food isn't better or more nutritious than conventionally raised food. Now, first of all, I can discern from the letters that I'm getting and emails that most people haven't read the study. Again, I understand that. Most people have jobs and kids and things to do, and they don't really have the time to go back and source this stuff. That's why you subscribe to video clips, right? Because I'm going to do it for you. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about this. 17 studies were included in the analysis, and those studies looked at not only produce, but they also covered milk, eggs, chicken, pork, and meat. And here's what the study said, and I'll offer some commentary for each point. First of all, there were no consistent differences in the vitamin content of organic foods with the exception of phosphorus content. And the researchers stated, and I agree with this, that phosphorus deficiency isn't an issue for most people. And I guess I would add to this, I don't know why we keep talking about deficiency conditions in this country. Everybody I talk to is suffering from diseases of excess. Too much food, too much protein, too much fat, too many calories. So the reason to purchase organic food is not because it's more densely nutritious and you're going to make up for nutrient deficiencies this way. I really can't take issue with the researchers here. Now, the protein and fat content of organic and conventional milk was the same. I agree. And this is why I continue to advise people all the time that you're really not helping yourself by converting to consuming organic dairy products instead of conventionally raised dairy products, or dairy products from conventionally raised animals, I guess is the better way to put it. Because with this pesky dairy protein, even if you defat the milk products, you still have the same risks for conditions like breast and prostate cancer. So I agree, not much difference. You need to stay away from this stuff, whether it's organic or not. The researchers found that the organic milk and chicken did contain higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids, but I would add to this that there is very little evidence to suggest that people in this country are suffering from a deficiency of omega-3 fatty acids. It's pretty easy to meet your requirement eating foods. I mean, I don't think a lot of people know, but there is a small amount of omega-3 fatty acid in apples, all right? So it's not hard. The other problem, though, is that our real issue is that we consume way too many omega-6 fatty acids from land animals and polyunsaturated oils, so we need to bring that down, not worry about supplemental omega-3 fats or trying to increase our consumption of that. Bacterial contamination was common for both organic and conventionally raised chicken, but the risk of finding bacteria resistant to 3 or more antibiotics was higher in conventionally grown chickens than organic chicken and pork. So again, we find bacteria and those kinds of problems in all animal foods, but it's rampant in the conventionally raised animals, and I've cautioned people about that for years. The researchers did find that organic produce was 30% less likely to be contaminated with pesticides, but noted that all organic produce is not necessarily pesticide-free. Now, as this relates to human health, less chemical exposure might be better, but the relationship between chemical exposure and cancer is still, I think, largely misunderstood. And it's not that I'm not concerned about chemicals. I have stated this so many times for the record. But the reality is that exposure to a chemical or a chemical carcinogen appears to be a little bit less important than continuous exposure to a cancer promoter. And I keep referring back to those studies that Dr. Campbell did at Cornell, where the aflatoxin-dosed rats did not develop cancer until animal protein in the diet hit a pretty high level, which most people in this country are exceeding on almost a daily basis. So, and then I also point to population studies that reinforce these findings, because in very polluted areas of the world, cancer rates remain significantly lower than in the United States, in some very polluted areas. So these findings don't mean that there are no reasons to purchase organic food. I'm basically saying that the researchers didn't say anything that contradicts what we talk about or that's new. So I'll reiterate the things that I've said in the past. Organic produce farming is a more sustainable form of agriculture. So if you can afford to buy organic produce, that's great. If it's available, that's great. If it's not, I think the thing that you should remember is the Environmental Working Group even has on its website the benefits of consuming produce outweigh any detrimental effects of exposure to chemicals. So keep that in mind when you're making decisions. Organic plant foods can be better tasting. They do contain less chemical residue. Organic animal foods don't contain the hormones and steroids and antibiotic-resistant bacteria that you find in conventionally raised animals, which is why I allow people to consume them only 2 or 3 times a week, excluding dairy, if you choose to want to continue to include those kinds of foods in your diet. The researchers really didn't conduct any studies on the issues that they didn't look at any research, I should say, on the issues that I just talked about. The issues that they did look at, I really couldn't take any issue with their findings. I can't really disagree with them. So the recommendations remain the same. Get rid of the dairy products, consume organic animal food if you're going to consume it, limit it to 2 or 3 times a week, and purchase organic plant foods to the extent that you can afford them and that they're available in your area. So that's it for video clips today. Have a great rest of the week and weekend, and I'll talk to you next Tuesday.